Remember all those investigations in the college campuses? Anti-Semitism, we gotta shut down all free speech. And you know what? We're gonna freeze funding for Harvard, Columbia, and Brown because they have systematic and systemic anti-Semitism. Well, someone working in the Trump administration is now telling us that was all lies. What was the real reason they were doing it? Well, Anna, tell us the story.
Well, Cenk, this is based on a whistleblower complaint that was filed Tuesday by a career Justice Department attorney. Her name is Haley Van Arum, an American hero. She's the former career attorney at the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. Okay, so she maintains that Trump's task force, which is tasked with investigating systemic anti-Semitism on Ivy League campuses, basically pressured universities to agree to all sorts of punitive settlements and measures when there was absolutely no evidence at all of abuse or anti-Semitism. Okay, I'm not surprised by this. I'm not shocked by this. This is the disgusting behavior that we've seen carried out against Ivy Leagues. And I want to just say one thing. All of these pathetic, mealy-mouthed Ivy League administrators who caved to Trump knowing that their university campus had no problem with systemic anti-Semitism should resign. They should resign, all of them. They're pathetic, absolutely pathetic. Lawyers accuse administration officials of using campus anti-Semitism as a pretext to cut federal grants to pressure Brown, pathetic, Columbia, pathetic, and Harvard. Trump officials had a predetermined outcome-driven approach to enforcement rather than a fact-based investigative process, it said. While investigators said they did not have the evidence to conclude the schools had broken the law. I want to note, the reason why I didn't call Harvard pathetic is because they actually decided to fight the Trump administration as opposed to immediately cave to them. So for example, at Brown, investigators, including Van Arum, that's the whistleblower, were told in April 2025 of a plan to systematically interview Middle East studies professors, particularly Muslim faculty, to see if they would say anything that could be labeled anti-Semitic, the document states. So in other words, while there wasn't a systemic anti-Semitism problem on these campuses, clearly there's a systemic anti-Muslim bias in our governmental institutions, namely in the Trump administration. So think about that. Think about like the feds coming into your university and demanding to interview your Muslim professors to see if they say anything that might hurt Israel's feelings. And again, they couldn't prove anything. They did do this. They carried this out. They did these interviews of Muslim professors. They didn't find anything. Van Arum and other DOJ assignees repeatedly warned that funding suspensions lacked legal basis and that evidence did not support findings of violations at Brown. In the cases of Columbia and Harvard, no complete investigation was even conducted. Now, Jamie Raskin wrote a strongly worded letter to Harmeet Dillon about this. I'm just referencing it to say that your letters mean absolutely nothing. I know you guys write your letters hoping that you'll get some positive recognition for it, but your letters lead to no change and you don't deserve positive recognition for it. Actually do something. Other than that, we need to move on. Look, Trump on January 29th of 2025 issued a directive to target anti-Semitism on these college campuses. He later increased it from 5 university campuses to 60 university campuses. And federal agencies began withholding billions of dollars in contracts and grants to pressure these schools into doing what Israel wants. That's what this is really about. That's what this is really about.
Yeah.
So elite universities soon began reaching settlements, starting with the University of Pennsylvania and Columbia University in July. As I mentioned earlier, Harvard University was an exception. They actually decided to challenge the administration's actions in court. In September, a federal judge ruled in Harvard's favor that the government illegally froze more than $2 billion in federal grants and contracts, a decision the government is appealing. Some universities paid the government millions of dollars. Others paid nothing but agreed to policy or personnel changes that satisfied Israel. because we're an occupied country. But back to you, Cenk.
Okay, this story is wild. Trump reportedly left Turkey on a secret military flight after officials received intelligence about a possible Iranian threat. He was moved in a catering truck to another plane while Air Force One continued on as a decoy. Now look at how differently that gets framed. On the left, the focus is, wait a minute, you left a plane full of staff and journalists behind to act as a decoy? On the right, the story is mostly about protecting the president, secret security tactics, and Trump joking that it was basically a James Bond operation. They did everything but put in dun 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 dun. Now look, of course you protect the president, but if there was a credible threat against the plane, what about everybody else on it? I've covered politics long enough to know that sometimes the most important part of a story is the part somebody wants you to overlook. I want to be able to see that for myself. That's why I use ground news. It puts reporting from across the political spectrum in one place, so you can instantly compare the framing, see the bias distribution, check the factuality ratings, and see who owns the outlets behind the coverage. Their blind spot feed also shows you stories one side is barely covering at all, because sometimes what gets ignored is just as revealing as what gets emphasized. Go to ground.news/TYT or scan the QR code to get 40% off the Vantage plan, the same plan we use. I absolutely recommend checking it out, ground.news/TYT. So I want to go through the different universities because there's so many interesting things in there that I discovered through this piece, and then come back to the issue of Israel and their assets inside our government. So first on Brown, Van Aram says, we investigated and there was no evidence that they'd done anything wrong. She tells her boss and her boss says, no, the administration doesn't want to hear that. So since we have no evidence, go pretend that we do so you could force them into a settlement. And Brown falls for it and gives them a $50 million settlement. They didn't know that there was no evidence at all. It was totally fabricated. But by the way, Brown should know that there was no evidence because it's their campus, but they got scared, we think. But there's another factor here, which is gonna lead us to Columbia in a second. But first on Harvard, I found out why they didn't give in. I gave Harvard a ton of credit because I thought, wow, look at that. They're standing up to these fake charges of anti-Semitism. I'm a little surprised by that, given how they cracked down on the protesters as well, right? But it turns out there was a reason why, because the administration wanted a lot of things from them, a legal, financial settlement to be able to manipulate their Middle Eastern history to make it more pro-Israel. In other words, for them to literally lie, but they requested that in every instance. But I was like, I don't think that alone is gonna do it. And it turns out, no, there was one other thing they asked of Harvard. To put their endowment, which is gigantic, in a place where it could be seized by the government. And Harvard's like, no. We're not letting you seize our, I don't know if it's up to 40 billion now or 70 billion. There's some monstrous endowment that they have. So they were so scared that would get seized. That's why they didn't agree to the deal. I mean, I'll take it, but that was their actual motivation. Okay, now back to Columbia. They say, okay, we're gonna cut 400 million in funding. So why don't you, with no evidence, nothing, your chance of winning in court is like 99.9%. And in return for us not cutting the 400 million, we want you to give us $200 million settlement. Well, who the hell would do that deal? You have an excellent chance of winning in court and you're gonna give them 50% of the money you would have gotten anyway? That doesn't make any sense. But Columbia's like, oh, right away, sir. Please come in and totally change our curriculum. And they gave the money. Why? Because the New York Times hilariously omits from its story the Israeli lobby. The Israeli lobby drove almost all of this, and yes, Columbia has board members who are radical Zionists. So they wanted to change their curriculum to make it more pro-Israel and lie to their students. They wanted to shut down all protests against Israel. So Columbia is like, oh golly gee, they're twisting our arm. Give them the money, yeah, and bring in their thought police. Absolutely, no one protests Israel on Columbia campus. That's because the board is in on it. And prove me wrong, board, prove me wrong. No, they're not gonna prove me wrong because we're absolutely right. And then they go on a fishing expedition to try to smear Muslim professors. What I wanna know, Anna, is who are the Israeli assets inside our government that gave the order to try to entrap Muslim professors on behalf of Israel? And we're not gonna get those answers because the entire government is infiltrated by Israeli assets, including at the very top. Donald Trump has gotten over $300 million from an Israeli family. And we're all pretending that that doesn't affect him. Our reporters are so comically in the tank for a different country that they're like, I didn't notice that the Israeli lobby was the #1 lifetime donor to Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell and almost all of our leaders. I can't see anything. I'm a reporter. Oh my God, some of these universities actually love the idea of doing crackdowns on their American and non-American students on behalf of Israel. I can't see it at all. I can't hear it, and I definitely can't say it. So that's what our comical press is, our government that is infiltrated by Israel at every level. And now you see it with your own eyes. And by the way, the courts, when they finally went to court in the Harvard cases, Anna explained to you, the judges laughed them out of the courtroom. Thank God there aren't Israeli assets, as far as we know, inside the court system yet. I hate to give them ideas, but for now the courts are holding, and the courts are saying there is no evidence of systemic anti-Semitism at all. You made this up completely. So then who made it up? Who made it up? And the reality is there is a deep state, and it works for a different country, and is constantly targeting Americans to take away their freedom of speech, to arrest people as they did on those campuses who dare to protest Israel, and to take away your rights so that you bow and surrender to a foreign nation. We should find every one of those assets and remove them from our government. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.